When Adrian Blackwood announced that he had lost his sight in a violent late-night collision along the Pacific Coast Highway, the city reacted with collective disbelief. News helicopters circled above the private hospital where he had been admitted. Financial analysts speculated about the stability of Blackwood International. Social media overflowed with sympathy, conspiracy theories, and morbid curiosity. For a man who had built his empire on foresight and control, blindness felt like poetic cruelty. But behind the dramatic headlines and carefully staged press briefings, Adrian could see perfectly. The accident had been meticulously orchestrated. The crash had been real enough to convince insurance companies and journalists. Crumpled metal, shattered glass, a controlled skid into a guardrail, but the injury itself was fiction. A discreet arrangement with a trusted specialist produced a convincing diagnosis: optic nerve trauma, uncertain prognosis. Adrian wore dark glasses, moved with deliberate hesitation, and mastered the subtle art of unfocused eye contact. Only two men knew the truth: his attorney and the head of his private security detail. Even his board of directors believed he was navigating darkness. His reason was simple, though dangerous. 3 months earlier, he had proposed to Vanessa Laurent. Vanessa had entered his life like a perfectly timed summer storm, beautiful, electrifying, impossible to ignore. She possessed a natural elegance that photographers adored and a quick intelligence that impressed investors at charity galas. Raised without wealth, she adapted to luxury with astonishing ease. Designer gowns, art auctions, diplomatic dinners, she moved through it all as if born to it. At first, Adrian admired her ambition. He respected hunger, it mirrored his own. But lately, small fractures had appeared in the polished surface. There were questions, subtle, probing ones, about trust funds and share distributions. There were tense silences when his legal team discussed asset protection. There were late-night phone calls conducted on balconies, her voice low and urgent. And there was something else. A certain impatience in her eyes when he spoke of scaling back his public presence after marriage. A flash of irritation when he declined a risky merger she had oddly encouraged. Adrian was not a man easily deceived. Yet love, he knew, could distort even the sharpest judgment. So he decided to test it. Blindness would strip him of power's visible armor. No commanding gaze across a boardroom table. No calculating glance that unsettled competitors. He would become dependent, slower, vulnerable. If Vanessa loved the man, she would stay. If she loved the empire, cracks would widen. The Blackwood mansion became his theater. Marble floors amplified the sound of careful footsteps. The scent of polished wood and fresh lilies drifted through vaulted corridors. Staff moved quietly, trained to treat their employer with protective discretion. Vanessa embraced her new role with theatrical devotion. "Oh, Adrian," she would murmur, slipping her arm through his as they descended the sweeping staircase. "Lean on me." Her voice softened in the presence of guests. She cancelled several public appearances, telling reporters she needed to care for her fiancé. She read business briefs aloud in the evenings, though her summaries often skipped financial risks and lingered on potential profits. Adrian listened carefully. He saw everything. He saw the way her lips tightened when he deliberately misjudged the distance to a chair. He saw how she checked her reflection in mirrored surfaces, ensuring her expression conveyed concern before approaching him. He saw her scroll through luxury real estate listings late at night, pausing on properties registered in her name alone. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the study's Persian rug, Adrian sat in his leather chair while Vanessa paced nearby. "The board is nervous," she said, her tone controlled but edged. "They're questioning whether you can continue as CEO in this condition." "In this condition," he repeated mildly, keeping his gaze unfocused toward the fireplace. "Yes," she replied quickly. "You need someone strong beside you. Someone who can represent the company publicly." "And who would that be?" he asked. A beat of silence. "I could," she said at last. There it was, not concern, but positioning. Later that evening, after Vanessa left for a private dinner she insisted would calm investors, Adrian remained in the study. The house grew quiet, save for the distant hum of security systems and the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Sir," a gentle voice called. It was Elena Morales, the newest addition to the household staff. She had arrived nearly a year ago, recommended by the estate manager. Unlike others, she carried herself without excessive deference. "Yes, Elena," Adrian replied, turning his face slightly toward the doorway. She entered quietly, placing a fresh cup of tea on the side table with steady hands. "It's chamomile," she said. "You didn't finish your coffee earlier." "Thank you," She lingered, the faint scent of citrus soap trailing behind her. Adrian sensed hesitation. Is something wrong? He asked. She stopped, then exhaled slowly. I shouldn't speak out of turn. Speak, he said calmly. I overheard Miss Laurent this afternoon, Elena continued, lowering her voice. She was in the east hallway. She didn't know I was dusting the library. Adrian's pulse steadied into something colder. What did she say? She was on the phone, Elena replied. She said, once the wedding happens, the blind fool won't even see it coming. The words hung in the air like a blade. Adrian's expression did not change. Did she mention what it was? He asked. Elena shook her head before remembering he could not see. No, sir, but she talked about changing legal documents. And about a man named Victor. Victor. The name settled heavily in Adrian's mind. Victor Hale had pursued hostile acquisitions against Blackwood International twice in recent years. Both attempts had failed under Adrian's strategic defense. Victor was ambitious, resentful, and persistent. Are you certain? Adrian asked. Yes, sir. He leaned back slowly, fingers interlacing over his lap. Thank you, Elena, he said quietly. You've done nothing wrong. She hesitated again. Sir, I don't think she knows I heard. Good. When she left, the study felt different, smaller, heavier. Adrian removed his glasses once the door clicked shut. The world remained sharp and painfully clear. This was no longer merely a test of affection. If Vanessa was aligning herself with Victor Hale, the implications stretched beyond broken vows. They threatened his company, his legacy, perhaps even his life. He replayed every recent interaction in his mind. Vanessa's sudden interest in board restructuring, her insistence on revising his will before the wedding, her careful inquiries about security protocols during his recovery. Had his experiment gone too far? Or had it revealed exactly what he needed to see? Adrian stood and walked unassisted to the window overlooking the sprawling estate. The city lights shimmered beyond the iron gates, indifferent to betrayal unfolding within marble walls. He had pretended to lose his sight to test loyalty. Instead, he might have uncovered a conspiracy. And if Elena was right, if Victor Hale was involved, then blindness was the least dangerous illusion in the house. The night before the wedding, the Blackwood mansion shimmered beneath a canopy of white lights. Florists moved like silent ghosts through the halls, weaving orchids and ivory roses into cascading arrangements along the grand staircase. Crystal chandeliers reflected polished marble floors, multiplying the glow into something almost celestial. To the world outside the gates, it was the eve of a fairy tale union, the resilient billionaire and the devoted fiancée who had stood by him through tragedy. In the center of it all sat Adrian Blackwood, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, dark glasses shielding eyes that missed nothing. He listened carefully as staff murmured updates. He measured footsteps. He counted pauses in conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Blindness, he had discovered, made people careless. They assumed invisibility meant ignorance. Earlier that afternoon, Elena Morales had handed him the recording. She had approached quietly while Vanessa was upstairs finalizing guest arrangements. The house buzzed with wedding planners and security personnel, but Elena moved unnoticed, as she always did. She placed a silver tray beside Adrian's chair in the lounge. Your tea, sir, she said gently. Her fingers brushed his hand for the briefest moment. Something small and cool pressed into his palm, a phone. Press play when you're alone, she whispered. Now, hours later, Adrian stood in his private lounge, the mansion temporarily still as guests retired to their suites. He removed his glasses and stared at the dark screen in his hand before pressing the button. Vanessa's voice filled the room, stripped of sweetness. After tomorrow, everything transfers. He already amended the will in my favor. The blindness made him reckless. A low male voice responded, smooth and satisfied. You're sure he suspects nothing? Adrian recognized it instantly. Victor Hale. Please, Vanessa scoffed. He can't even see his own reflection. Once we control the board, the merger goes through. And if anything goes wrong, the mountain roads are unpredictable. A pause. By the time he realizes what's happening, she continued coolly, the brakes will have already failed. The recording ended. For several seconds, Adrian did not move. The air itself seemed to tighten around him. He had expected betrayal, financial manipulation, perhaps public humiliation. But murder, he replayed the final sentence in his mind. The brakes will have already failed. Tomorrow, after the ceremony, they were scheduled to leave immediately for a private airstrip 2 hours away. The route cut through steep mountain terrain, sharp curves and long descents. A brake failure there would be catastrophic. His jaw tightened, but his thoughts remained precise. Emotion could wait. Survival could not. He replaced his glasses and reached for the discreet intercom on the side table. "Marcus," he said calmly when his head of security answered. "Come to the lounge." Alone. Minutes later, Marcus entered, a former military strategist who trusted Adrian without question. Adrian handed him the phone. "Listen," he instructed. Marcus's expression darkened as the recording played. When it ended, silence settled heavily between them. "Understood," Marcus said at last. "Inspect every vehicle on the property," Adrian continued evenly. "Discreetly. No alarms. If you find anything compromised, secure it and detain any suspect attempting to leave." "And Miss Laurent?" Marcus asked. "For now," Adrian replied, "she remains unaware." Marcus nodded and left without another word. Upstairs, Vanessa stood before a gilded mirror, adjusting the silk robe draped over her shoulders. Her reflection glowed beneath warm lighting. On the vanity lay her wedding jewelry, diamonds that caught even the faintest flicker of light. Her expression, however, was not bridal. It was calculating. A soft knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called, assuming it was a stylist. The door opened. She froze. Adrian stood in the doorway, without his cane, without hesitation, and without the uncertain posture he had so carefully performed for weeks. He removed his glasses slowly. His gaze met hers directly. The color drained from her face. You can see," she whispered. "Perfectly," he answered. The silence between them was electric, dangerous. "How long?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Long enough." Her composure cracked, fury replacing fear. "You lied to me. You planned to kill me." She laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. "Don't be dramatic. The brake lines of my car were severed," Adrian said evenly. "My security team found the damage 20 minutes ago." For a split second, panic flickered in her eyes before she forced a smirk. "You have no proof it was me." Adrian stepped further into the room. "I have a recording." Her lips parted. "Victor Hale is currently being detained at my front gate," Adrian continued. "He attempted to leave when my security team locked down the property." Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. "You think he'll turn on me?" "He already has," Adrian replied coolly. "Men like Victor protect themselves first." The weight of inevitability settled over the room. "You would have had everything," he said quietly. "A partnership, respect, influence earned honestly." She scoffed, though her voice trembled. "Influence earned honestly. I was never going to be more than the Billionaire's charity case. The girl who married up. You could have been my equal," he said. "No," she snapped. "I wanted to be your successor." Footsteps approached in the hallway. A firm knock followed. Marcus entered with two uniformed officers behind him. Vanessa's gaze darted toward the window as if calculating escape, but the estate's perimeter was already sealed. "This isn't over," she hissed at Adrian as the officers stepped forward. "It is," he replied. As they escorted her out, she twisted back toward him. "You'll regret humiliating me." Adrian watched her go without flinching. When the door closed, the grand suite felt strangely hollow, stripped of illusion. The orchids downstairs, the silk, the diamonds, all of it now seemed like decoration for a performance that had nearly ended in tragedy. Hours later, police vehicles lined the driveway beyond the iron gates. News of Victor Hale's arrest began to circulate quietly among guests, though the official statement cited financial misconduct. The wedding, of course, was cancelled. Adrian found Elena in the kitchen just past midnight. She stood near the counter, hands trembling slightly as she dried a porcelain cup. "It's over," he said gently. She looked up, relief flooding her expression. "Are you safe?" "Yes." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I was afraid I'd misunderstood. Or that you wouldn't believe me." "I believed you," he said. He studied her openly now, no glasses, no pretense. She shifted under his gaze, unused to such attention. "Why did you help me?" he asked softly. "You could have stayed silent." She hesitated, then answered with quiet honesty. "Because when I thought you were blind, you seemed alone. And no one deserves to be alone in danger." Her words struck deeper than the betrayal ever had. Adrian had staged blindness to test loyalty. In doing so, he had stripped away the noise of flattery and ambition. He had seen greed more clearly than ever before, but he had also discovered something rarer. Integrity. Outside, flashing lights reflected off marble columns. Inside, the mansion exhaled as if relieved of a poison. Adrian stepped closer to Elena. "You saved my life," he said simply. She shook her head. "I just told the truth." For the first time since the so-called accident, Adrian felt the weight of genuine clarity. Wealth had built walls around him. Power had drawn opportunists. But vulnerability, real or feigned, had revealed character. He had pretended to lose his sight to uncover deception. Instead, in the darkest moment, he had finally learned who could truly see.